Okay, please come in, take your seat. All right, we're going to get started. So, welcome to the 2025 National Federation of the Blind Legislative Seminar. Okay, we do have a packed agenda, so we're going to get started. Hopefully we'll get through it all, but if not, it's okay. Maybe we'll have a part two. So I want to welcome you. First, I want to go over a couple of house rules. Number one, and most important, be respectful. Remember, we are not a political organization. We are apolitical. We're not on the left side or the right side. We are on the blind side. Number two, what do you do if you would like to be recognized for our NFB veterans out there? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Who's calling for the floor? Kimberly, what do we do? All right, sounds good, all right. That's what we do, and wait to be recognized. I believe, Joe, can we get a wireless, we probably need a wireless mic to run around the audience. Okay, thank you. And number three, if you can please remember to mute your phones. Mute your phones, very important. You don't want any distractions as we talk about these important issues today. Mother Teresa said, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples." And that's what we do in the National Federation of the Blind. We come together to cast waves of justice. So we are going to today hear from two very important members and distinguished members of the Arizona legislature, two senators here. And then afterward, we're going to go over some important updates that Amy Porterfield would like to let us all know regarding the way that VR will be funded, and just some things to think through. And if we have time toward the end, you want to get your notes out, because we are going to go over laws that blind people depend on, federal laws that blind people depend on. Very important for us to be educated on those. All right. Okay. So I want to introduce someone who has been working alongside the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona for a while. Senator Cavanaugh is over a 30-year resident of District 3, which covers half of Scottsdale, Fountain Hills, Rio Verde, the Fort McDowell Yavapai Reservation, a little bit of North Phoenix, Cave Creek, and Carefree and Anthem. It's a big district right there. And New River as well. John and his wife, who is named Linda, who is or was the former mayor of Fountain Hills, by the way, have been married for over 49 years. We should clap for that. They have two sons, Jonathan and Nicholas. Senator Cavanaugh is also a professor of criminal justice at Scottsdale Community College and teaches at the best university, Arizona State University. Prior to teaching, Senator Cavanaugh served 20 years as a police officer with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey Police Department, retiring as a detective sergeant. He released a new book recently called State Legislatures, an Owner's Manual. That's pretty cool. It's a way to offer the public an unprecedented insight look at how America's state laws are shaped, debated, and enacted. Please do us and do him a huge favor, show him some Federation love as he comes to address us. Please welcome Senator John Cavanaugh. The majority leader, by the way. The majority leader, by the way.
All right, well, thank you very much. I feel like I'm teaching one of my college classes because half the students are in the back of the room, and those in the front row will wind up getting A's at the end of the. Although there's no test on this. So yeah, I've been in the Arizona State Legislature for 19 years. I always say I will leave the legislature when 200,000 people vote me out or 6 people carry me out, because my wife has this honey-do list that is so long I fear going home. Easier doing this kind of stuff. Well, the legislature obviously affects everybody's lives, and I think the main way we affect people's lives is through the budget, because the budget is actually the main policy document that we do. Because anything we want to do, any policy we want to do, almost always requires money. And if you don't give it money, then it doesn't happen. So it's a big policy document. Over the last several years, we have passed a number of appropriations, I think, that have benefited the blind community. Going back to 22, we created the Independent Living Older Blind program to help people become independent living, getting skills together. Okay. We gave $250,000 to keep the Department of Corrections Braille program. They have a lot of prisoners who do Braille books. In addition, going back that same year, we gave the Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind full status as a regular school to get funding and money, and we also increased the screening programs to help them get their students into the right tracks and what have you. Of course, we recently expanded the board for the blind. We gave it a renewal, and much more recently, we gave $100,000 this year to the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind for early childhood therapies. You know, we will continue. We were trying to get $1 million, but that kind of fell through. But there's always next year, so things don't always happen the first time around. You feel free to contact your legislator. You know, there are a number of ways you can do that. I actually have a whole chapter in my book about the most effective way. But the most effective way is through a personal communication, be it a phone call if you can get through. But if you're going to do an email, write a personal email. A lot of groups sponsor these mass mailings where you go to their website, you say, yeah, send an email on my behalf. You know, and then we wind up getting hundreds of the exact same email with people's names inserted. And it doesn't really quite carry the same weight because there's no real personal input, no personal passion or you know, want in the email. So it's always good to try to do personal legislation. But by the same token, maybe more effective is working through organizations. You know, like this, I know you have a legislative liaison. When you have people who are well-versed in legislative issues that come to us, meet with us, give the pros, give the cons. Sometimes they'll say, well, you know, the other side will say don't do it because of this, but they're wrong because of this. That's really the most effective way to get legislation through. And of course, you have to keep trying because if you're really lucky, your want occurs in a year where we have, like, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars or even $1 billion excess cash, and everybody is usually taken care of then. The bad times are when we have to cut or we have virtually no new money, so it's kind of cyclical. But in terms of getting legislation passed, another thing I mentioned in my book is that a bill to get passed has to go through 21 separate steps. And at each of those steps, either one individual or a committee or the whole chamber can kill the bill. I mean, the bill has to be, after you introduce a bill, the president or the speaker, they have to assign it to a committee. If they don't, the bill's dead. bills get assigned to more than one committee. Each committee chair has to agree to hear the bill in committee. If they don't, the bill's dead. The committees have to vote the bill out by majority vote. If they don't, the bill's dead. After it goes out of committee, it has to go to a special rules committee, and again, the chairman may or may not hear the bill. If the chairman or woman doesn't, the bill's dead. If it passes out of rules, the chamber leader, president, or speaker has to release the bill to the committee of the whole, which is all the members where they can amend it. If the speaker or president doesn't, the bill's dead. If it goes to the committee of the whole, it has to pass by majority vote. If it doesn't, the bill's dead. If it passes out of the committee of the whole, the speaker or the president, depending on the chamber, has to bring it before the entire chamber for a third read. If they don't, the bill's dead. If it passes, it then gets transmitted to the opposite chamber where it has to go through the exact same process. Every one of those steps, each one an opportunity to kill the bill. Then, if it actually finally gets passed out of the second chamber, if the second chamber made a change by amending it, it then has to go to a special small conference committee with members from both chambers where they try to work out a compromise version. If they can't work out a compromise, the bill's dead. If they do compromise, the compromise goes back to both chambers, and if the speaker or president decide to put it back up to the full chamber for a vote, if they don't, the bill's dead. If they do, the bill hopefully passes. If everybody votes, if a majority vote yes, then it goes to the governor. The governor can veto the bill. If she does, the bill's dead, unless you can take it back and get a 2/3 vote in each chamber, which, frankly, rarely happens. In fact, I've been in the legislature for 19 years. I've seen a lot of bills vetoed. I have never seen a governor's veto overridden, because most members don't like to vote to override a governor's veto, because that is dissing the governor, and governors are like elephants. They have a long memory. And they can then veto your bills just because you overrode his or her veto. So that's why it's very hard to get bills through, and that's why some bills take, years to eventually get through, or in fact never get through. And it's actually a good thing that we do that, because a lot of bad bills get introduced. A lot of bills have problems that aren't apparent when they're introduced. Every state except one, Nebraska, has 2 chambers, a House and a Senate. Nebraska only has 1. I can't tell you the number of times that I introduced a bill, which I thought was perfect. It flew through the chamber I was in, and when it got to the other side, some horrible problem was discovered with it in terms of the way it worked. And it either had to be amended to correct it, or in one occasion it was so bad that I just killed the bill and figured I'll do it next year. And having 2 chambers and having all of those steps is a protection against bad bills becoming law. And this, of course, comes from the founders of our nation, right? Because almost all state legislatures are modeled after the U.S. Congress. They have the 2 chambers, because the founders of this country were extremely fearful and suspicious of government. They viewed government as an enemy, because it was the English government, the king, that was oppressing us, and we had to have a revolution to get free. So they were not friends of government, so they made it really hard for government to mess with people. In fact, even after they set up this system with the 2 chambers, they still couldn't get the government formed, because the people still didn't trust the big government, and only after they put the first 10 amendments, which guarantee us rights like speech and assembly and press and religion and right to bear arms, could they eventually get the U.S. government going. So it continues today, turmoil, controversy, but still providing us all with the best quality of life and standard of living of anybody in the world. And I'm very proud to be a small cog in that big machine. period.
So we will, thank you, Senator, again, for coming and talking to us about the legislative process. This is very informative for our members. We have some questions, and again, if you are wanting to ask a question, please state your name and wait to get a mic. First, I'm going to open up to our President, Donald Porterfield, to ask a question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jordan. A lot of you are aware that we had some legislation that we were pushing to get additional funding for the Older Independent Living Blind program, and Senator Kavanaugh was a driving force behind trying to help us get that. And at the very last minute, he talked about the 21 steps. At the last minute, before the legislature adjourned, budget was passed, and our bill and the $1 million budget increase didn't happen. So, Senator Kavanaugh, can you tell us a little bit about that actual process, and how do we get this legislation over the line in the future?
I'm sorry you asked that question. Otto von Bismarck was a German, big leader, back in I guess the 1800s, 1700s, right? And he once described the process of governments enacting legislation as making sausage, stating that it's something that most people would not want to see. The 21 steps that I spoke about were the formal, procedural, written legal steps. However, if that in and of itself is sausage-making stuff you don't want to really see. But there are other things that happen in bill making that, there were workarounds. The Arizona Constitution says that each bill has to be read publicly on the floor 3 times on 3 separate days. So we can't rush things through to give people time to know it's coming and mount opposition and what have you. But there's a workaround. I can fulfill the 3-day rule with a new bill in about 8 hours and not violate the Arizona Constitution. Now you may say, how can you do that? Well, I would take the bill that I wanted, and instead of introducing it through the normal process, I would find a bill that was already introduced and is sitting in a committee waiting to be heard. And I would say to the chair of that committee, I would like you to strike an amendment onto that bill. And that amendment is called a strike everything amendment. It's called a strike everything because the first line of the amendment to this bill is strike everything below this line. It erases the whole bill. And then the next line says, now add this, and that's the new bill. Now, this bill in committee that I just put the new bill onto was already first read because it's in committee. So the minute the committee passes that bill, the speaker or the president, depending on the chamber, will go to the floor and formally second read that bill. Now we have 2 of the 3 required reads done. The speaker or president will then put it before the committee of the whole and then wait until 1 minute after midnight. What is 1 minute after midnight?
The next day.
A new day, the 3rd day. So at 1 minute after midnight, you can pass the bill. And if both chambers have the same bill with the same procedure, we call those mirror bills, what the Constitution of the state of Arizona says is supposed to take 3 whole days, we can do in about 8 hours. That's called a workaround. That is the informal side of the legislature. And all organizations have formal procedures and informal procedures. The $1 million, I knew I would get there. That appropriation was being carried by a member who had it in the budget. At the last minute, that member, with several other members, fell off the budget, said if he didn't get some other stuff, or they didn't get some other stuff, they would vote against the budget. They wouldn't vote for the budget. We passed, which means that those members who fell off the budget, all of their requests were removed, because that's a matter of discipline. If you reward people who aren't helping you and give them what they want, then nobody will vote for the budget and you'll have a total chaos. So it was removed because that member dropped off the budget. And unfortunately, it was being carried by somebody who left the budget. In the end, we passed the budget, but without that person and several others. So it got essentially lost in a dispute which really had nothing to do with the merits of the $1 million. Hopefully, we can get that back next year. Although next year it could be a tight year in terms of funding. However, I certainly will make an effort, and I suspect Senator Farnsworth will too. If we can't get the full $1 million, at least get $500,000 squeezed in there. So, as Paul Harvey would say, and now you know the rest of the story.
We appreciate the ins and outs on how the sausage is made, per se. There you go. And thank you, Senator Kavanaugh, for the commitment to support the Older Living Blind program as much as possible. So we truly do appreciate your partnership on that. One question I have, because I know that a lot of our members have this question as well, is, so we know that typically around 85%, I've seen different numbers, 80 to 85% of people in Arizona, eligible voters, decide to vote from home. And currently, blind or low vision Arizonans or print disabled voters who are trying to vote from home are not able to do that independently. Now, we've definitely have had conversations with Senator Kavanaugh about this before, and what the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona long-term goal is that we want to establish an electronic voting system to be able to securely and privately vote at home. So we know that several states, such as Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Maine, North Dakota, Utah, and West Virginia, they have laws that allow voters with disability to return their ballots electronically. So Senator Kavanaugh, I'm not asking you to kind of make a stance one way or the other, but what I'm asking is, can you break down to our members on what the process would be and what the odds are of getting electronic voting passed in Arizona?
Yeah, and I actually need some clarification from you, because I'm a little confused here. I know that in 2022, Tyler Pace passed a law about visually impaired voters getting early ballots. And I know then in 24, Ken Bennett had another such bill involving access procedures. Is Pace's bill not working and Bennett's bill was supposed to correct that and it didn't pass? Or I'm not sure where we're at with that. I mean, there's no excuse not to allow people to vote by mail. Yeah.
I can probably provide some clarification because we had put forward or worked with the legislature to try to pass some legislation that would allow for vote by mail as well as a electronic return option. And the language that we originally provided got modified pretty severely, and the bill went through. The bill really kind of lacks teeth because it doesn't specifically, say, an electronic ballot, or doesn't reference things like the UCAVA system, which is another electronic balloting form for military and overseas civilians. And I'll be honest, I don't think the state of Arizona does the UCAVA very well, because on the side that's supposed to enforce it, they're not enforcing it, and that of course would be through the Secretary of State's office, and that's been for years, not just recent. So the latest one, the 2024, was or the 2022, excuse me, I'm sorry, was a bill that we were really trying to bring about, the possibility that through the Secretary of State's office and the county recorder's offices, we as blind people would be able to register to receive a secure electronic ballot. Not a paper ballot, but a secure electronic ballot, whether it was connected to the ballot website, or whether it was like something like an accessible, fillable PDF, where we could complete our ballot and return it electronically. And so the language out there right now doesn't give blind or print disabled individuals that opportunity or that right.
Do people under UCAVA have that now?
Yes and no. I mean, and I say that because and that's why I said earlier that how UCAVA is done in the state of Arizona isn't always the best. The people on UCAVA are, by and large, all sighted. So you can send them just a straight out PDF. They can print it, fill it out, stick it in an envelope. They can print, like, I think they can print the label for the return ballot. They can fill it out, complete the envelope, and send it in, all independently. There's no provision about accessibility under UCAVA, and some of the people have told stories, and when I say some of the people, I'm talking about military and civilians that have been overseas and voted, that they're told, oh, just take a picture of your ballot with your phone and send that to us. And we're not asking for something like that, because we genuinely want to make sure that whatever system we have is a secure system, so one that withstands any kind of scrutiny. I think if you ask some of some of your colleagues, they would say that there are challenges and struggles with the current UCAVA system the way it currently is.
Not only is election stuff extremely complicated, election stuff is unbelievably controversial. And even if it shouldn't be controversial, it can easily get sucked into a whirlpool of controversy. And this is controversial, and it also is this is rather complicated and also potentially controversial. As a general rule, when confronted with such problems, I call a woman called Gina Swoboda, who is an election guru. She's currently the chair of the state Republican Party, but she worked for recorders, and she knows everything about elections. She's even one of Trump's advisors on elections. Why don't you give me a call in September when everybody's back from vacation, and I'll set up a meeting with Gina and us and figure out if we can get this thing solved.
before Jordan starts speaking again, I'm going to say thank you very much because, we were hoping that we would be able to sit down and meet with you and whoever else you felt was necessary for us to continue advocating for this important right, to cast that independent ballot. Thank you.
Absolutely. We are glad to hear, and we will be more than honored to sit down with you, Senator, and whoever else like President Porterfield you feel would be appropriate. Because again, our goal is not to be controversial. Our goal is to advocate for blindness equality across Arizona. So we don't want to get in the way. We just want to make a way for us. All right, so we're going to open it up to questions. We have time for a few, maybe like 3 at most. We'll see how we go. Remember, if you want to ask a question, state your name. We'll wait till you get a mic, and please be respectful of the senator and his time. So,
Daryl, where are you? Daryl? I'm right here.
Hi, thanks for coming, Senator. So every time I go to the Capitol building, I invariably meet one, if not more, people who it seems their job is essentially to attend various meetings and take notes, and then they work for various lobbying companies or lobbying organizations. I'm not necessarily suggesting that we do that, but I was wondering if you think that a version of that, like if members of our organization did something like that, if we would get perhaps some of the intel that we need to have a better chance of passing some of our legislation, kind of going to the more informal part of the process you mentioned earlier. Thank you.
This is Senator Farnsworth. I'd like to respond to that. I am very passionate about individuals getting involved in the process. And it is true that the lobbyists down there have a tremendous amount of influence. They are paid by different corporations and so forth, but the method they use are the same methods we can use. And that is, it takes time and a lot of hard work, and the lobbyists don't necessarily have an advantage over the rest of us as citizens, and I consider myself a citizen because I've been a citizen a lot more than I've been a senator. But it basically takes time getting acquainted, and one of the things I like to tell people is get acquainted with the assistants. Don't worry so much about getting an appointment with the elected official because they're hard to get through to, but generally the assistants are much easier and they know more about what's going on anyway. They're down there 40 hours a week, paid by the state, right through the interim. During the summer, they're still on the payroll. And so if you get acquainted with an assistant, it can be very valuable. They have the ear of us as senators. And there again, the lobbyists sometimes have less respect. Well, when people come into my office or want a meeting, if it is what I tell my assistant, I call a real person, a citizen, if I have a choice between meeting with a real person and a lobbyist, I'll meet with the real person because I know what the lobbyists are all about. They're paid to do their job, and some of them really believe what they're saying, but generally they take a contract and they push what they're being paid to push. But they do gain advantage because they've been there a long time. In fact, I've been in the legislature 3 times. I was there back in the 90s for a short period of time, then I was out for 20 years. And that was a very valuable 20 years because I could no longer say the government is out of control and there's nothing I can do about it. Because yes, the government is out of control, but knowing the process, I knew there was something I could do about it, and I didn't need to be elected. Each one of us have the opportunity to study a different issue, and you know, you can become an expert really quickly compared to the average person on virtually any subject, because most people don't know a lot about every subject. So you choose your favorite subject, research it, and then you are the expert. And you contact, and as Senator Kavanaugh said, please don't send an email that's a form letter from some organization and you just add your name to it. We have those coming in sometimes thousands in a day, and they just get filed, if you know what I mean. But if a person writes a personal letter in an email, and I'll tell you, still my favorite is snail mail. And it doesn't happen very often. We don't get very much mail, written letters anymore. But when they come in, I give special attention to them. Reminds me of the old days back in the mid-90s when I was in the legislature the first time. We didn't have email back then. And so my assistant would open all the mail and lay the stack on my desk, and I'd go through. But it's a matter of getting attention and respect. And if you want to have influence, one thing is you become acquainted. Now there's 90 members of the legislature, right? There's 60 in the House, 30 senators in the Senate, and getting acquainted with each one of them is a challenge, especially when you're visually impaired. But with today's technology, you can go to the website, which is excellent. And I don't know how you do it, but I'm sure there's technology that will read it to you, and it has the bios of all the legislators. But becoming acquainted with the legislators, reaching out to them. When I came back the second time in 2013, one of the challenges is getting an appointment, okay, as I mentioned. So easier with the assistant. When I came back in 2013, I told my assistant I wanted to meet with all of the other 89 members of the legislature as soon as possible. And 2 years later, I had met with about 80%. So it is a challenge. And the point is you start early. You don't wait till January. I tell people, if you want me to sponsor a bill, don't come to me in January. It's way too late. May 1st. May 1st is when I tell people the new session starts. Now, this last year, we weren't adjourned in April like we should be. Nevertheless, I tell people, think May 1st and start working. So what I'm doing is I'm having Zoom meetings, and of course, Zoom meeting is challenging for a blind individual, but otherwise it's like a phone call, and we have a lot of people on those phone calls. I have one, I call it the LD10, because I represent Legislative District 10, LD10 Senate Advisory Team meeting, Monday morning at 7 a.m., and I've been having that Zoom meeting every Monday morning at 7 a.m. for over 2.5 years. And so the members of my district can come on, and we spend an hour talking together and getting acquainted. And it's not reserved just for members of my legislative district either. I have someone from Snowflake that calls in, and from Tucson that calls in, and you're welcome to. Just contact my assistant and she'll put you on the list. But now I'm long answer to a short question. But anyone here in this room can have a powerful influence on the legislature. So repeating myself, get acquainted with legislators, reach out, and you don't have to have a particular bill in mind to ask for an appointment. Ask for an appointment, sit down and say, just wanted to introduce myself. And then, because like I said, it takes a while to get those appointments, and then become an expert on whatever you want to talk about simply by doing your own research. Anyway, sorry for the long answer, but Hey, Senator Kavanaugh has taken all the questions. I thought I'd take one.
Love it.
And if there's one thing I know about our Arizona affiliate, we are not afraid to send out personal emails or hop on a Zoom meeting, by the way, because that's what we do. So I think that was some sound advice, and we will definitely be taking Senator Farnsworth on his advice. And I do remember him and his assistant actually inviting a few of us to those meetings. So I want to thank you for that. Yeah. We are very high tech indeed. All right, I believe, Kim, you have a question, right?
I do. So this is Kimberly Fetterman. I am the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona's Senior Division President. And I want to pick your guys' brain. So transportation can be a huge challenge for us. And there's some cities that have got it and some cities that are going to get it. Meaning that there is a program called Ride Choice. And Ride Choice is a door-to-door service for people with disabilities. And in some of these cities that don't have it, I want to try to figure out how we can get them to get on board with the other cities that do have it. From talking to some of these different cities that have it, they are actually saving money by utilizing third-party companies such as Ubers and Lyfts and UServe. When they have paratransit, which is another door-to-door service, but they pick up other people along the way, which that one trip to your doctor that could take 20 minutes is now taking you 2 hours each way. And I'm sorry, my mind just went blank. So in a lot of the different cities with the paratransit, again, it's not as convenient to where utilizing the, oh, sorry, now I know what I was going to say. Sorry. Saving the money. So with the paratransit, it's the employees of the city, it is their insurance, it's these different things that does cost the city's money, money. But my question to you guys is it appropriate, would you think that we could go to either the state level or even higher to get these services, the Ride Choice programs, in all the different cities within either Maricopa or even beyond Pima counties and these different things, or the whole state?
This is Senator Farnsworth again. I would like to address that because my number one passion is transportation. I'm chairman this year of Appropriations and Transportation, and that's a good question you ask and a very challenging one. I would like to address it a little more generally in that I believe that we have not spent enough money for transportation in the state of Arizona forever. I grew up here in Arizona. I was here before the first freeway. And when I was here growing up in Mesa, a lot of the roads were dirt roads still. And so I've seen great growth. We have probably the best freeway system in the nation, which we're really proud of. But it's not good enough because we are rapidly growing. And there's a lot of folks that aren't being properly served, including what you're talking about. Now, I will mention that I am east of Power Road, and we have no bus system at all east of Power Road, and I have waited for over 20 years hoping there would be some movement there, and there still is not. And so I've been fighting for that. In fact, in the budget process, I got 3 funds, transportation funds in the budget. One for transportation innovation, which could possibly address your question. It's simply there's just, what do we put, $2 million in the fund. And it's for a grant for someone that can come up with an innovative idea of how we can make transportation better, and primarily to satisfy those that have no transportation. Again, Santan Valley, for instance, has over 100,000 people down there. They have no freeways. They have no highways. The roads they have are very inadequate and crowded, and that's just one example. So I represent East Mesa and West Apache Junction. I have represented Santan Valley in the past. Anyway, again, long answer, but we need innovation. Now, let me shift gears a little bit and talk about money. The state of Arizona spends $66 billion a year. That comes out to approximately $2,100 a second. 24/7, 365, $2,100 per second. Now, in my opinion, we should shift a lot of that money over to transportation, because transportation blesses everybody.
That's right.
If you want to have a job and you can't get there, now nowadays we do have alternatives, working for home and so forth, but there's nothing like showing up at the office and having a desk. You really feel like you really have a job that way. And there's a lot of folks who struggle financially, they're undereducated, they don't have the technology, and they have no way to get to a job. I've talked to people in my area, east of Power Road, and they say, we would love to hire more people, but they have no way of getting here. So I was talking to someone this morning about the possibility of starting driving smaller vans. I ride the bus regularly myself. I have to drive to a park and ride and then get on the bus to ride to the state capitol. And we've got these $1 million buses that have 5 to 20 people on them. Very inefficient. And every one of them is driven by a union driver with all the, they have all the benefits of vacation and so forth, which is wonderful, but it's very expensive. And so we're looking for a revolutionary idea of how we can cut cost. If we used a 15-passenger van, a driver of a 15-passenger van doesn't even have to have a CDL license. They just regular driver's license, and they can have them. And the minimum wage now is what, $17 an hour? And when you pay that much money for a company that's trying to struggle to get started to create transportation for people, it's hard to do. But it's my belief that a person out in Apache Junction that has no job and could get a part-time job, they would be willing to work for less than minimum wage in the beginning to get started, because it's legal to pay less than minimum wage for part-time. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea to, I'm not knocking the minimum wage. I'm talking about how in the world we're going to get transportation into these areas that have none, because the cities don't want to spend the money. And Valley Metro is expanding routes in the middle of the city where there's lots of people, because they like raking in the revenue. We need to take care of people that don't have transportation. And I saw from the expressions that talking about less than minimum wage didn't go over well at all. So I apologize for that. Let me just make this final comment that we are spending a lot of money. The vast majority of the money spent in Arizona are on education, which is vitally important, and the social programs, which are vitally important. But we also have waste and fraud. I just watched a documentary on Sunday called All the Queen's Horses. I recommend that you tune into that and listen into it. It's a real live documentary about someone in Illinois, a little town in Illinois. This lady was the bookkeeper for the town, and in a period of a dozen years, she stole $53 million. Wow. In a small town. It was the largest theft recorded in the history of the United States. And she pulled it off in a small town. And meanwhile, public services, the streets were were breaking up. It showed a picture of one thing that was literally falling apart. And it was a coworker. She went on vacation, and a coworker requested some paperwork to do the job she needed to do, and she looked at an invoice, and it didn't make sense. She had a separate account, and she's funneling money, signing the checks herself, and funneling money to herself to a different account. My point is this. We have fraud in Arizona. I don't know where it is, but if everyone pays attention and knows that, and I just started a new Zoom meeting Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. It's called the Senate Appropriations Advisory Team. And whoever wants to join in is welcome. And I'm hoping to get whistleblowers of past government workers that know where the bodies are buried, so to speak, if you know what I mean. Because there's government workers who are afraid to say anything because they don't want to lose their jobs, but once they retire, perhaps someone would be willing to step up, even anonymously. Just tell us where to look. And then beyond that, the more broad is inefficiencies in government. And so it's my goal to find fraud if we can, waste and inefficiencies, and shift all that we can in my power to transportation, because that will help all of us. Sorry for the long answer again, but I'm very passionate about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we
And
certainly-
there's a second important lesson in that, which is after you embezzle 10 million, take the money and run.
Well, we are certainly wishing you well, Senator Farnsworth, on finding that fraud, and hopefully we can invest it into transportation and making sure that us as blind people are able to not really worry about how we're going to get somewhere or when we're going to arrive and not have to wait forever to get our ride. So we wish you well, and we are here to partner with you on that effort, right?
Yes.
All right. By the way, 1,000, 1,000. That's already $42,000 that the state of Arizona just spent in 2 seconds. Wow.
We have one more question.
We have one more question. This will be our final question.
I'm trying to think of what the question is, because I know the issue, and well, the question would be, what would you recommend for me to move forward with bringing personal stories to you? I probably have, at least 5 people who I personally know and work with in the West Valley area who are blind and learning how to deal with it. Don't use technology. They can't. They try, and they do as much as they can, but it's difficult and it takes time. So in the first part of being blind, some people need a little bit more personal assistance. So basically, I'm saying personally, like somebody who calls for a ride. Number one, they can't stand out in the heat and wait for a bus, or they can't even walk to houses because of their inabilities. And just knowing, like, where is the car? What way is it facing? Is the driver looking at me?
Are you asking how can we get our stories told? Is that what the?
Pretty much, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, would it be like best on paper? Should I try to get people to come to you, to join in a Zoom meeting?
So,
Yes,
Okay.
that's my question.
and I know they answered a little bit earlier. If you guys want to elaborate more on that, you definitely can.
This is Senator Farnsworth again. I'll try to make it short. It's hard for me, but about 6 months ago, I took my desk out of my office and I replaced it with a conference table. And the idea there is I want to meet with you. And this is a perfect example of a challenge that you are aware of And you are aware of the challenges for blind people more than we can imagine. So if you come into my office, and the answer to that question in my mind is just, you've got to advocate, you've got to speak up, you have to be determined, not give up, and find those legislators that are willing to listen. And I guarantee you, I am willing to listen. And you are welcome in my office. And that's how we got involved with the Senate Bill 1505, which we got passed this year, is Jordan Moon. Jordan and some of your associates came into my office. We had a good talk, and they explained the need, and I said, hey, I will be happy to sponsor the bill. I didn't do much work. I just said yes, and I put my name on the dotted line, and they did all the work. But to advocate and make people aware, and it's not easy, but don't give up. And if someone closes a door and obviously doesn't seem to care, then find someone else. Because there's 90 people down there, and most of the 90 will care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Did you have anything to add to that, Senator Kavanaugh? No, that's okay. Good advice. Good advice, he said. And we definitely remember, along with myself and Kim Fetterman and Chris Crawley, we're in Senator Farnsworth's office, and that actually leads us to the next portion of our legislative seminar. So if I can have Sharonda Good please come up. How many of you out there read Braille? How many of us out there understand that Braille is extremely important to be taught the right way? So one of the stats that I absolutely love to say is, and you can find the unemployment rate, or people who are either underemployed, unemployed, or just not in the workforce at all, not seeking work, who are blind, is hovering typically around the 65 to 70% range. However, 90% of people who are proficient in Braille are employed. So needless to say, we are very happy that the state of Arizona has raised their standards to now have UEB be the official Braille that is taught here. And so to talk a little bit more about our efforts and to present Senator Farnsworth with an award and appreciation, please welcome our president, Donald Porterfield.
You guys are going to be tired of hearing from me, but you've heard about the legislative process, about the difficulty of getting legislation passed, and it's the same with this particular piece of legislation. We've been trying to get this bill passed for years. It was paired with another separate issue, and we made the strategic choice because of how important Braille is to make it its own, policy and priority for the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona. And as Jordan said at the very beginning, we work with everyone who is willing to work with us. Whether as he said, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green. Our focus is on making sure that we improve the lives of each and every one of you in this room and the blind generations to follow. And when somebody such as Senator Farnsworth steps up and sponsors our bill, that's huge. I mean, that's significant. You know, and I mean, the last bill we had passed that we actually pushed was back in 2018. You know, how many of you guys remember the blind the parents bill? Protecting the rights of parents, blind parents, and this is equally as important because 98% of the people proficient in Braille have jobs, and we all want to be independent. We all want to be able to do the things that the rest of the world is doing. So, I am incredibly grateful to Senator Farnsworth for for sponsoring our bill S 1505, and for that, we would like to present an award to him. Is Sharonda up here?
I am.
Okay.
I'm going to read what the award says. National Federation of the Blind of Arizona. Live the life you want. Legislative Ally Award, presented to Senator David Farnsworth for their distinguished service as a legislative ally and sponsoring SB 1505 on behalf of the blind community of Arizona, ensuring that Braille is taught to the highest standard. Presented this 22nd day of August, 2025, in recognition of their invaluable partnership and commitment to building a more inclusive and accessible future for all. Presented by Donald Porterfield, President, National Federation of the Blind of Arizona.
Are you giving it to me?
Thank you very much for your support, for sponsoring that bill.
Thank you very much.
If you would like to say a couple of words, sir, you definitely can. If you want to talk for about 5 minutes.
I think I've said enough, except except thank you very much, and I know that yes, I sponsored the bill, but most of the work was done by your associates down there that worked tirelessly. So, thank you. It's a beautiful award. It has English and Braille.
Yeah, it's in Braille as well, by the way. So his certificate does have Braille overlay on it. So every time he sees that certificate, he will think of the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona. Once again, we thank Senator Farnsworth, Senator Kavanaugh, for your time, for your energy, for your willingness to work with the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona, for working with us already, and for what we have in store for the future. We will definitely take both of you up on your offer to continue the conversation, including joining Zoom meetings and meeting with Senator Kavanaugh in September. We appreciate your time. Can we give a huge round of applause and a thank you to the two senators for coming? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
See you in September.
Thank you very much.
Jordan, thank you, Senator Farnsworth.
You betcha.
All right.
Thank you. Beautiful award.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I have Amy Porterfield come up? She's still in the room. All right, Amy. While Amy's on her way, I want to let everybody know that on the NFB of Arizona website, you can go right now and look at our new advocacy and policy page. It is up there. You will find resolutions posted. You will find contact information for our legislatures, and you will find our talking points that we had for our Phoenix seminar. So go up there and advocate. All right, so Amy is going to come up in a moment. She's making her way up. So that's az.nfb.org. You have no excuse not to be able to have contact information for anybody who want to reach out to. Yeah, that's right. We should clap for that. Absolutely. You heard them basically give us a call to action. So we need to take them up on that for sure. So I'm more fired up now than I was before we got started. So let's go. All right, so Amy's going to come up here and talk to us about some important updates regarding the CAP program and how that is being funded and just things for us to. CAP?
Oh, I said PAC. I'm like, wait, that's what I mean.
No, not the PAC plan. That's Beasley.
Yes.
All right, so here we go. Here's Amy.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So this is, it is about the Client Assistance Program, but it really ends up being about a lot more. So as you know, this is now the time that the United States government sets and passes the budget for next year. And so there's a lot of conversations, all kinds of conversations happening about what that means in all different kinds of areas. I want to talk specifically about what we're looking at when it comes to vocational rehabilitation and our services that provide us the training and resources that we need to go to work, right? Because that's what we want. We want to work, support our communities and our families and ourselves, and be equal members of society. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are at this point, what's potentially in front of us, and some things that we can start to do about it. So right now we have the president's budget, we have the proposed Senate budget, and we need to still hear from the House on what their budget proposal looks like. So for vocational rehabilitation, in 2024, we did not receive a cost of living. It was kind of flatly funded. In 2025, we got the cost of living increase for 2024 and 2025. So the president put forward, the executive budget, and that is flatlining the rehabilitation, vocational rehabilitation program back to the 2024 range. So we do lose some funding there. It's, not what we want, but it could be worse, right? But the scary thing about that budget is that it zeroes out the funding for the Client Assistance Program. The Client Assistance Program is, by law, the organization that oversees the way that funding happens for vocational rehabilitation clients, making sure that we have access to correctly facilitated rehabilitation plans based on the law. So when you zero out that funding, the idea is that, who's going to do the oversight? But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So according to the law, without a client assistance program, federal funds cannot be used to pay for vocational rehabilitation. So without a CAP program, you cannot spend federal money on voc rehab. There is some language in the president's budget that says states can use the money that they have for voc rehab to fund the CAP program if they need to. But deeper down in the statute, in the law, it states that the federal funding for CAP cannot be the federal funding for voc rehab because it's supposed to be overseeing that funding. So there is a catch-22. Does that make sense? I know it's this part's kind of complicated. So We got funding in the president's budget to continue Voc Rehab at 2024 levels, which is this is less than, removes the cost of living. And it does not provide funding, separate funding for the CAP program, but it says we can use Voc Rehab money for the CAP program. But the law for Voc Rehab says you can't use that money to fund the program, to that CAP program, if it's supposed to be overseeing that money. So we have a catch-22 in this process that has the strong potential, unless something happens, that eliminates all federal funds for the vocational rehabilitation program. So that means we'd only be, Arizona gets about 70, what is it? Like $80 million for the vocational rehabilitation program, and the Arizona legislature only gives like $3 million of it. So think we'd be dropping from like $80 million to $3 million for everybody. That would be devastating. But this is not done. The government, this has just started, right? So that's the president's budget. The Senate has come through and made their budget, and it's bipartisan and really, really supported by almost unanimous, right? So we feel really, the Senate is really behind their budget. Their budget funds the vocational rehabilitation program, including the cost of living and a cost of living for 2026, and funds the CAP program. So we look great in the Senate budget for services. The House budget has not come out, and they are a little bit more concerned about cutting spending, and they have not come out of like really loving the Senate's budget. They want to cut back more. So our job is to educate our legislators, our lawmakers, and the executive branch about how important Voc Rehab is. So the CAP program, the Client Assistance Program, only cost $13 million for the whole country. That's just a teeny little drop in what we're talking about with the budget, right? For $13 million, all states could be funded, and we can keep getting blind people to work. So what we'd like to do is start to develop some stories, some personal stories that tell the story of how much vocational rehabilitation programs have helped us. And we want to put together in those stories just some really simple language that says, without the CAP program, we can't have a vocational rehabilitation program. For $13 million for the whole nation, we'll continue to get blind people working. So what's going to be coming your way fairly soon is kind of some video and writing storytelling templates so we can write our story. Hi, my name's Amy Porterfield, and I was a client of vocational rehabilitation. And through vocational rehabilitation program, I received access technology and training, and I got my college degree, and I was able to get a job at that time as a counselor and raise my child and pay taxes. And these programs help people like me go to work. And then a little lane that says something like, the Client Assistance Program is mandated to allow for federal funding to be spent for vocational rehabilitation program for $13 million for the country. These programs can continue. Please remember to fund the CAP program. So I wanted to kind of explain that to everybody at first, so when we start getting these little templates coming out, you know what they are and what it's for. So the National Association of Blind Rehabilitation Professionals is working with the policy and advocacy team with the NFB to develop these templates, and we're going to be doing this across the country. So start thinking about your story and what Voc Rehab has done for you, or what it will do for you, and how important that is for you to live that life that you want. It's a really small ask, and it's a really technical little issue, and it's the kind of thing that can slip through the cracks if we don't do a good job just educating and saying, this is a really tiny thing that really will spend the money they want on the right things to get us to work. So I can take questions, because I know it's kind of a technical issue. Any questions, or did that make sense? If that made sense to you, that's amazing. I'm really proud of myself, because it took me a while to understand it. So, Well, then that's all I have.
Can I just ask Amy, like,
Yeah.
just to kind of ease the mind of some of our members, right now, can you give us an update just to clarify, like, where it is right now in process? I think you were mentioning there's 2 separate bills
Yes.
making its way
So
through.
just like Senator Kavanaugh said, there's 2 chambers in the federal Congress as well. So the Senate is going to make a budget. They have made a budget, and we really like that budget. And the House is going to make a budget, and they have to reconcile those 2 budgets, and then the president's going to need to sign it. So they're going to consider what the president's budget says and how it aligns with what the different sides of the House want, and they're going to come together with a budget that everyone likes. And there's lots of really, really big things in that budget that you see on CNN. No one's talking about a $13 million CAP program, right? No one's even thinking about it. So that's why we're trying to connect with people that know us, that we know, our own Congress people and throughout the country, just so they can say, look, this is a really technical little issue, and this would keep us getting to work. So there's a long, long way to go. And the fact that the Senate has remembered it and put us and funded it nicely is a really great thing. And we're continuing, like the Jesse Shirek and the policy and advocacy team at the NFB, they've been meeting with different people that are in the policy making and just saying, hey, this is a little something that people don't really know about. Can we choose? We want to make sure we remember it. We know that the executive branch wants to continue to have vocational rehabilitation services. Their intent was to keep it going and fund CAP. We just need to make sure that we close those little loopholes and educate people. We feel like this is going to be fine, but we need to do our part and educate, especially our congressmen in the House, because that's really important for them to understand that this little tiny bit of money that no one's even thinking about will help us to stand and work.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So definitely look out for the emails. This is very important. Like Amy said, you know, we just want to be proactive, right? We're not saying that it's for sure in danger, but if we sit on our heels, everything will pass us by. So we have to continue to let our voice be heard, because like she said, $3 million to run this statewide program won't work. It just won't. So let's check our emails. If you need assistance with sharing your story, you're making sure that you're telling it the right way, you know who to reach out to your chapter president, and I'm sure they'll be glad to assist, because this has to be something we all do. All of us, or most of us, I'll say, have benefited from VR. So we can't let this moment pass without doing our part. All right. I'm sorry? Let's make it happen, indeed. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Make it happen. All right, we at the Washington seminar earlier this year were led by our government legislative team, of course, on a national level. And if you remember at that time, when it was early February, there was a lot of conversations about, speaking of budget cuts, just budget cuts, and it wasn't quite clear where the administration, where House members, Senate members would cut from at that time. So one of the things that our awesome president, very intelligent president, Recca Bono, did at the very last minute before our Washington seminar was he came up with a fact sheet. On one side, it is laws that blind people depend on, and on the other side, it is funding that blind people depend on. Every single member, all 450 legislatures, were given this fact sheet. And there were quite a few that we've met with in Arizona who actually didn't know the ins and outs of something like the ADA. Maybe they heard about it, or they didn't know necessarily how certain things were funded. So we're not going to go a lot into the funding part. We'll definitely get the fact sheet out. And by the way, you can go right now on nfb.org/Washington-seminar and see it up there. I believe it's still up there. It was a couple weeks ago when I looked. But what we are going to do for the final part of the legislative seminar is we are going to go over laws that blind people depend on. And it is crucial that we all understand on a basic level what these laws are, because at some point you're going to be asked to defend them. And if you haven't encountered a situation yet where you need to be aware of them, you will. So we are going to talk about 3 laws here. Feel free to ask questions. We're not going to go into very detail. This is not like a classroom. There's no exam afterward. You don't have to pass, although we do encourage you to take notes. If you get the wrong answer, we're not going to ask you to leave the room. So don't worry about that. We just want our members to be informed, because a well-informed organization is very valuable in today's society, of course. So we are going to first talk about the 1973 Rehabilitation Law, and to do that, we have our president again, Donald Porterfield.
Thank you, Jordan. As Jordan said, there are some laws that we as blind people rely on. And we rely on those because society is not set up to accommodate our needs. But we exist in society. Many of us work, pay taxes, and many of you that are in school will one day be in the same position as those of us working, and you're going to want that equal access. We've been struggling and fighting for that equal access since 1940. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was crafted. I believe it was actually passed and enacted into law in 1974, and it contained several significant sections. You know, Section 508 deals with like accessibility for government employees, but Section 504. How many of you guys have ever heard of Section 504? Who would like to take a brief stab about telling us about Section 504? Remember, I said you guys are going to get tired of me talking, and maybe I'll start singing.
Anybody out there?
How many people have heard of like 504 plans? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, what is a 504 plan?
I think I heard Mr. Hilliker back there.
And that's all we're asking for is a stab. Okay, and that's enough to get us started in kind of the focal point. It was an important piece of legislation that set about establishing rights for people with disabilities, particularly in that educational environment. because prior to that, a blind person was more than likely either sent off to a separate school or they were put in a special ed class, special education class, and not given opportunities with their classmates because they were just viewed as not as capable. During the Biden administration, the state of Texas filed a lawsuit claiming that Section 504 was unconstitutional. The reasoning for their claim really didn't have anything to do with people with disabilities. It dealt with, as I should say, people with disabilities as we see it. It dealt with gender dysphoria, which was originally not a part of Section 504 or the Americans with Disabilities Act, but the state of Texas filed the lawsuit because they had an issue with it's not even an official part. Well, it's a regulation, but it wasn't amended into Section 504. But they're using that to claim that all of Section 504 is unconstitutional. Now, if we lose, what is the significance of us losing? We not only lose the protections that 504 gives us, but it opens the doorway for them to challenge the constitutionality of the Americans with Disabilities Act, IDEA, and it creates an environment in which we will be basically fighting our enemies who have circled us. It will make it increasingly harder for us to get the services that we currently receive, because basically they would be unconstitutional. Now, what is unconstitutional, or what do they claim is unconstitutional about Section 504 other than the gender dysphoria? Because they say that that's really, when I say they, there are 17 states that have signed on in support of this lawsuit. Arizona is not one of them. So. But the big thing that, like I said, they're challenging the gender dysphoria, and a second session of what they're challenging addresses the constitutionality because they say it's an illegal spending mandate, whereas the federal government is telling the states how to spend money. Now, the National Federation of the Blind has responded. It is the single greatest priority that our legal team is pursuing right now. Those of you that were at the National Convention had an opportunity to hear from Eve Hill, who is our general counsel. She talked about a lot of different legal battles and issues that we're facing, but she talked at length about this Texas v. It started out as Texas v. Kennedy, or not Kennedy, but Becerra, and now it's called Texas v. Kennedy because Robert Kennedy Jr. is now the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. So they say that they're not really challenging the constitutionality, and we've asked them to remove the language then. They continue to tell us we're not challenging the constitutionality, but at the same time, this is where actions speak louder than words. They have not removed the language. So we are still in what's called the initial disclosure or discovery process, where both sides are requesting and receiving information from each other. We will more than likely file, a request for summary judgment against them. We're really, really early in what could be a long legal battle, but it's really important that everybody in this room understand that if this is successful, it will negatively impact each and every one of us. So when we talk about advocacy and the National Federation of the Blind being a grassroots civil rights advocacy organization, when there's a call to action, a legislative call to action, please respond, react to it. How do you know that there's a legislative call to action? One. Email, website, social media. What was that? Emails, website, social media. Through all of those. How many of you are not currently signed up on the listserv for the National Federation of the Blind? Not
Clap your
signed
hands
up.
if you're not signed up for the listserv. It's okay.
So that means everybody in this room
Okay,
is
we got one
getting
person.
all the legislative alerts, right? or not. If you are not signed up, it is an easy process. And if you need some help, we can help you do it. You can sign up by going to www.nfb.org. If you are not yet a member, I would encourage you to join our organization. Part of the onboarding process gets you signed up for that. And then we have the state of Arizona listserv that you should sign up for. We'll send, sometimes we don't write form letters. We don't send out form letters, but we give you a basic template for writing a letter. We always encourage that you tell your own story or the story of somebody you know that has been impacted and why the legislature needs to take that change. So the Rehabilitation Act is an important piece of legislation. Section 504, a subsection within that, is critical to the education of blind students, and the education of blind students is critical to the success of blind people in general. So I can't hear that.
Can you, let's get a mic over there. Any questions? Say your name, please. Oh,
Wait a second, I'm coming.
hold on one second, because it's hard to hear you up here.
Heather?
It's okay.
Hi, it's Heather.
Hey, Heather.
I was just saying it is important, the 504, and these topics are important for people to hear our stories because, like for me, example, I have an ability one job that's amazing and it allows me to provide for my family, and that the 504 protects me with this, so it's important to, because it changes lives. It changes my life, my kids' lives, and then other people around us, so.
Thank you, Heather. Absolutely. Anybody else have a thought or a question?
I don't have enough steps in this.
Rebecca, you got to come to the front, Kim. Get those steps in.
Here you go, Rebecca. Thank you.
I just have a question. How do you get active to try to make changes? For example, right now you were talking about the employment or for the seniors, trying to get funding for voc rehab. I'm new to the organization and I really want to get active because, like she just said, it affects all of us, and why they're trying to change it through the their lifestyles. Maybe we need to help them to make their own funding so they can have their own funding so it doesn't take it away from us. I don't know. I'm just throwing out that idea. But how do we go about getting active to get like on a board, or so we can get into these meetings so we can help with questions for other people like us?
So I'm going to start with the most basic answer I can give anybody, and that I think I do, about how do you get active and get on board with some of these issues, is to make sure you're actively participating in your local chapter, because they start addressing issues like local transportation issues all the way up through those issues at the federal level. But being active within your local chapter, and then making sure that when things such as our Phoenix seminar are coming up, that you're working with the team that is putting that together to get more involved and to learn more about the process, that the processes that we follow. You heard Senator Farnsworth and Senator Kavanaugh talk about establishing those relationships, and that's what our Phoenix seminar is all about, meeting with those 90 legislators and establishing the relationship. So there's no one simple answer to say how do you get involved. You had asked the question, part of your question was about, the funding and them finding funding for themselves. And I think I need just a little bit of clarification on that. When you talk about them finding funding for themselves, who are you specifically referring to?
I was referring to the individuals that were trying to take our funding away because of their lifestyle, and maybe they just need some help or something that way.
So, and the individuals trying to take our funding away, or to take the rights and protections that we have away, are the state of Texas and its governor and attorney general. And it's not that they're seeking to remove funds with this bill, even though that will be one of the downstream consequences. They've, no other way to say it, they don't like people that have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and they don't see it as a disability. But address that issue. Don't say that Section 504 is unconstitutional. Section 504 has been in law since 1974. And why now is it unconstitutional? So, hopefully that answered your question. If you want to become active in the policy and advocacy of the affiliate, I'd reach out to Jordan Moon. He is our legislative director. So, okay.
And I'll just add this. Oftentimes when we first join an organization like this, we don't see ourselves as a leader. But I hope that anybody who feels that way gets that out of your head real quick, because we all have a role to play. It doesn't matter the title. So I think Rebecca, you had mentioned, how do I get on a board? I would say, don't worry about that. If that's something you want to do, then great. But don't let the fact that you're just joining make you think that you are less than anybody here. Because it takes all of us to share our stories. Can I get Bob Kresmer to the stage real quick? And I'll be quick with this one, because I really want Mr. Kresmer to dive, and we only have a few minutes, so I'll try to breeze through mine. Okay, all right, even better.
I will. I'm coming.
He's going to go through in a moment IDA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is very important to all of us here, as well as some basic information on how special education in Arizona is funded. Before he does, though, I want to give a very, very brief overview of the ADA, like the Cliff Notes version, because a lot of people may not be aware. So the ADA was passed on July 26, 1990, and it has 5 titles. So really quickly, I'm gonna run through them, and you can definitely do your own research, but you need to make sure that you at least are vaguely aware of the ADA. Not to say that it is under attack, but it might be under attack. So, Title I is all about employment, and it prohibits discrimination from individuals with disabilities on all aspects of employment. But the catch is it only applies to employers with 15 or more employees. So not to say that you can get discriminated, or it's legal to discriminate if you have 10 people at your job and they say, we can't hire you because you're blind. But what I'm saying is you would have a harder time in court based off of the quote unquote what is written in the ADA. It does require quote unquote reasonable accommodations. I'm not going to go into what that is, but the job can determine what is quote unquote reasonable for you. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act deals with state and local government services. So it prevents discrimination from state and local government entities. So it applies to all programs and activities that your state and local government has. So this will include, and discrimination also, right, is a form of inaccessibility, right? So this includes public education, courts, voting, and transportation, including bus and rail services. So Title II is what we often cite when it comes to, for example, earlier we talked about the right to a private independent ballot for blind people. When we get to Title III, we go into public accommodations, and it prohibits discrimination in places of public accommodation. So these are private entities that offer business open to the public, such as restaurants, hotels, stores, movie theaters, private schools, and health clubs. Doctors' offices, hospitals, anything that you can go to that the public is able to go to. Now, there are a couple exceptions. Does anybody know one place, there's a few places, but does anybody know a place where Title III does not apply? Religious institutions. That is a tricky answer, but essentially, remember, we in this country have a long history of separation between church and state, and in order to get the ADA passed, there were a lot of religious institutions that fought very hard, because you have to think of some of these old, buildings, some of these historic buildings may be in a church or something, and they would have to outfit their church to make it accommodating. So I'm pretty sure, look, I'll put it like this. I've never been to a church or any institution where it has been that way, but I can tell you that there were lobbyists back when the ADA was being formed that pushed to get that part included. And by the way, you're going to hear about this coming up in our resolutions committee, but we recently discovered that in Arizona, websites are not considered a public accommodation. So yeah, well, more on that to come. Come to the resolutions committee. Title IV deals with telecommunications and just requiring, again, phones and internet. Back then, they didn't really talk about internet, of course, in 1990, but phones, telecommunication to be accessible. It does require closed captioning of federal funded services, and there has been some amendments that do require, for example, certain broadcast companies to have a certain amount of hours of audio description. This was formed by the Obama administration. And then we get to Title II, which is more like miscellaneous things that just kind of clarifies some of the aspects of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I wanted to run through that really quickly. And I'm sorry I was quick, but I do want to give some time to Mr. Kresmer because I know a lot of people are curious on the IDEA. So Bob, we have about less than 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So any cliff notes you can give us, and maybe time for a few questions, and we'll wrap it up.
Sure, here's the Cliff Notes version of IDEA. Back in the 60s and 70s, during that tidal wave of civil rights organizations, civil rights laws, and civil rights marches, they formed the Individuals with Disability Education Act, which says, in effect, that every student with disabilities in America has a right to an education in the least restrictive environment, and also mandates that reasonable accommodations should have to be made to make sure that student can be successful. Up until that point, local school districts, local schools could say, well, we don't know how to handle a blind child. We've never had a blind child. We don't have any trained personnel. We don't have the money to hire teachers of the blind. We don't know nothing about Braille. Besides, the state has a special school for blind people. There's that Arizona State School for the Blind, and there's the Michigan State School for the Blind. Just gather up these children and send them to that environment. And that began years and years of lawsuits and policy-making decisions. But in the end, the least restrictive environment is the local school district, is the local neighborhood school. And government and organizations like the National Federation of the Blind came to the aid of parents to say, you do not have to send your child 500 miles away and only get to see him on weekends or holidays. That is no longer the law of the land. And school districts no longer have the right to say, we don't need this student, we don't want this student, we have no teachers for the student, take him away. So this began the federal programs of educating teachers of the blind, teachers of visually impaired children. Teachers across the nation began to be taught how to teach in the local school district, what kind of accommodations have to be made, how do we introduce Braille into the system, how do we teach children to move through the elementary school system into high school and into college with the standards that apply to every other student. There's no longer any reason to say, well, this student is blind, so we don't expect the same thing of this student. This student is blind, so we have to keep them out of physical education or math or science. They no longer can do that. And that's the reason that we support the programs of different colleges to educate teachers of blind students and stick to their standards and demand certification so that no longer can blind students have to expect a second-class education. That's the Cliff Notes. Questions?
Porterfield, but not with a question.
Donald?
So the IDEA, the ADA, and the Rehab Act, there's an important thing that all of these pieces of legislation that we benefit from, share. They were passed with Republican presidents and Republican majority or bipartisan Congresses. So, like Jordan said, you know, it's easy to look at today and see that everything's happening and say, you know, this is the way the Republicans work. But I think having heard Senator Kavanaugh, having heard Senator Farnsworth, it's, you know, we have to find those individuals who have value in the issues that we're advocating for. But know that the pieces of legislation that could potentially be undone because of the Section 504 piece of legislation or piece of litigation, all, you know, we're supported by Republican presidents and bipartisan Congress. It's a great piece of information to share if you are engaged in a conversation with a policymaker.
Any questions? Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Okay, so as we have reached the end of our legislative seminar for 2025, I hope that this is the beginning of the next step for you. You've heard what we talked about, so what are you going to do about it? Don't just let us sit here with the mic and tell you that we got to do these things and share your story and contact your legislature. You heard directly from Senator Farnsworth and Senator Kavanaugh that they rather talk to us instead of lobbyists. So let's take them up on their offer. If you leave this room today after hearing all this, and this is the last time that you do anything until this time next year, that's really not good. Let's not make that be the case. So get involved, meet with your local chapter, come to Phoenix Seminar. If you want to go to Washington Seminar, there's even funding for that, right? Yeah, absolutely. How many of you have actually been to Washington Seminar? Clap if you have. Yeah, that's a good amount of people, right? It's possible. Somebody's really clapping back there. That means they must have loved it. So get involved. Don't let this be the last time. And let's go build the National Federation of the Blind of Arizona.